Good day. Welcome to Western Hills. Book of Genesis, chapter 14 today. And chapter 13 ends with Abraham and Lot. They went separate ways with too much cattle and not enough farmland. They went separate directions, and Lot headed off to the plain of Jordan, while Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan. So as we get into 14 today, Abraham's going to be among many foreigners, and we're going to find many foreign names here. All right, Genesis 14, verse 1 reads, And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Ellasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. So the next 12 verses may seem a bit confusing, but in total, what's happening here is they describe a war, a dominant confederacy that consists of 4 kings. Many generations back, the first world power consisted of 4 cities that established by Nimrod, the land of Shinar. We talked about that back in Genesis 10. This has now given way to a world confederacy consisting of 4 kings. The first king is Amraphel, king of Shinar. Now, Shinar is the Babylon that existed 2,000 years prior to King Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon of Daniel's time. And Amraphel is a successor of Nimrod, most likely a descendant. The second king here is Arioch, king of Ellasar. Third king is Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, which is east of the lower Tigris. King Chedorlaomer, he is the Lord Paramount of the others, and you could call him the commander-in-chief of the United Forces. The fourth king we find here is Tidal, and he would be king of the smaller nations of tribes. So these 4 nations, they're linked together to make war. Now recall that Shinar is the region where families dispersed after the confusion of tongues. So this confederacy is coming together to make war on the kings and territories that we find in verse 2. So in summary, the next several verses during this upcoming raid, Lot is taken captive, which gets Abram's attention, who then pursues, overtakes, and defeats the enemy and recovers his nephew as well as all the prisoners and property that had been taken. On Abram's return, we're going to find he receives refreshment and blessing from a native priest who is priest to the Most High God. So that kind of summarizes what we're going to find here in this chapter here. All right, verse 2. That these made war with Berah, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and king of Bela, which is Zor. These that made war. So this is the 4 kings we just talked about in the prior verse. Berah, king of Sodom. Berah in the Hebrew means evil, which fits the identity of King Berah of Sodom perfectly. And Sodom was the chief territory in power, luxury, and wickedness. So what we see here is that King Amraphel and his allies, all 4 kings, attacked the king of Sodom and king of Gomorrah and kings of other smaller towns around Sodom, the 5 kings there. And Sodom was defeated. They took Sodom captive, and along with that, Lot was became captive as well. Verse 3. All these 3 were joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. Vale of Siddim, this is where we find the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah, the very ruins where God destroyed it, as believed by many archaeologists. Verse 4, 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So in the 13th year, they've had enough of Chedorlaomer. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer, the king, and the kings that were with him, and smote the Raphaims and Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shavan, Carithaim. Notice here, what we got here is the old Raphaims, which is one of the names for the fallen angels, a branch of them, the Nephilim. So you got some bad people within this. And this is only an example of what's coming again in the end times to the end generation. The generation we're looking at now, a lot of evil. And the Horatites and their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. And there went out with King Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zor, and they joined battle with them in the Vale of Siddim. So when you have all this, this evil and perversion going on in the cities, he thinks God's going to bless them in this battle? Of course not. Of course not. With Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. So here they've amassed together, marching into war. They've amassed enough troops to really take them over. And the Vale Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountains. So these guys were beat pretty badly. And what was left over, they ran into the slime pits and were certainly defeated there. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals and went their way. So the invaders took all the goods and went their way. They cleaned them out there. Verse 12. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abraham. So Abram was dwelling in the oaks of Mamre near Hebron. In other words, not far from the scene of the war here. And these guys, Abram's buddies, were Mamre and his brothers Eshcol and Aner. So at this point, Abram has finally gotten word that his nephew Lot was taken captive. And so Abram is now going to take action to get him back. Verse 14. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. says here, Abram heard that his brother was taken captive. What is this? It wasn't his brother. This is a customary term. Of course, Lot was his nephew, as we previously talked about. So here we got Abram, 318 guys, 318 troops. And Abram and his 318 servants, they're going to pursue the Babylonians and take back the captured people and his nephew there. And he divided himself against them, and he and his servants by night, and smote them, and he pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. So here Abraham, he only took 300. He took his 318 men with him, as well as his allies, and they drove the Babylonians back to their homes, all the way back to Syria. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought back, or I should say, brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So Abram rescued them, freed them, and brought back all his goods and peoples. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Sheba, which is the king's dale. So they got their courts thumped pretty well there. But here comes Abram with all the goods and all the people, and the king of Sodom went out to meet Abram there. Verse 18 here. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. So who do we have here? Melchizedek. Who is this? He brings forth bread and wine which would be that which later would be the blood of Christ, and the bread would be Christ's body. Do you suppose that this was Christ we have with us here? We can find the answer to that in the 7th chapter of the great book of Hebrews. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High, who met Abram, returning from slaughter of the kings, and blessed him, to whom also Abram gave a 10th part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the 10th of the spoils. So Melchizedek certainly wasn't born of a woman. He didn't have a father, didn't have a mother. And this is God, the very God. This is why Abram was successful with only 318 men. God gave him the victory. The lesson here is always keep God in the equation in everything that you do. All right, verse 19. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. Abram saw Christ, the King of righteousness, Melchizedek, on that day, and when he returned from battle as the kinsman redeemer, saving the life of his next kin, his nephew Lot. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thine hand, and he gave him tithes of all. How is it that Abram could defeat those kings and nations with only 318 men? It's because God, the Most High God, delivered them into his hand. Abram blessed and adored the Most High God. Verse 21. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons and take the goods to thyself. So here we have the king of Sodom trying to buy off Abraham. How did Abraham handle this? Verse 22. And Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth. So Abraham is so much saying, I don't want your stuff. You got to remember here, Sodom was an evil, wicked. It was a very perverted place, and Abraham doesn't want any part of that. This is a serious matter with Abraham. Abraham made an oath before God. He says here, with uplifted hand, he would not touch the property of Sodom. Abraham, he surely felt that there was some danger of moral contamination with any part or any alliance with this city there. Verse 23. That I will not take from that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou sayest, I have made Abram rich. Abram is saying, I don't want your filthy riches from battle because it is God that gets the glory. Abram did not want to be said that later that any part of Sodom or Satan's kingdom made him rich. Verse 24, save only that which the young men have eaten, and a portion of men which went with me, Anar, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. Abram doesn't accept any part of the spoils beyond which was consumed by the men in their expedition, but Abram does accept the portion to which his confederates, Anar, Eshcol, and Mamre, became entitled by their share. It's basically a recovering of the property. It was theirs in the first place. So in closing here, Abram would not bargain with Satan's people. He would not become part of holding on to any of Satan's system. Abram took 318 men and conquered 2 nations and freed the captives there. Why? Because God delivered them into his hand there. If God be with you, who can be against you? Amen and amen.